caught his attention wasn't just the noise, but the height of this creature. He estimates it was about 8 feet tall. I mean, he's flat out convinced that he saw a Sasquatch. What happened next adds another layer to the story. When the family dogs were let out after the video was taken, they went into a complete frenzy. The submitter acknowledged that while the glowing eyes in the footage might look like any typical forest animal, what the video fails to capture is the sheer size of whatever was out there that night.
These are the craziest discoveries we made in 2024. Starting in England, where amateur archaeologists unearthed one of the largest Roman dodecahedrons ever found. Till this day, though, what they were used for still remains a mystery. In Iran, they discovered the world's oldest lipstick, dating back 4,000 years. An Italian junk dealer discovered that the old painting he had hung up at his family-owned restaurant was actually an original Picasso, now worth over $6.6 million. In Botswana, the world's second largest diamond ever was unearthed. We were gifted with this clip. Back to Earth, a scientific expedition in Peru discovered 27 new species, including an amphibious mouse and a blob-headed fish. Scientists discovered an association between low testosterone and high anxiety. Japan discovered the skeleton panda sea squirt, which, for such a random name, is somehow the perfect description. And how could we forget the evolution of life on Earth and even space was thrown into question after the discovery of dark oxygen on the floor of the Pacific Ocean.
The boys are introducing themselves to the camera. Something bizarre happens. Right behind them, a mysterious figure suddenly appears. If you pay close attention, you'll notice a shadowy shape moving swiftly toward the river. The boys didn't realize it at the time, and by the time they reached the river just moments later, the mysterious figure had vanished. And I have to say that is pretty creepy. Let's dig in. What could this have been?
Where are the aliens?
When you say what are the aliens, what do you mean?
Where are the aliens? Like, why don't we see them? A lot of people think we see aliens, but I've not seen any evidence of aliens. Yeah, we've got 6,000 satellites in orbit, and not once have we had to maneuver around an alien spacecraft.
Right. But on this Earth, the U.S. military has had to do a lot of maneuvering around objects they can't explain.
I mean, there's always a bunch of classified programs that are underway of new aircraft and new missiles and things. So that are classified even within the military. So it's, only if you have the top secret compartmented clearance would you know about this new program. So then, some pilot sees something fast moving past and says, "Hey, I saw a UFO." I'm like, yeah, that was actually a new weapons program, but we can tell you that. The split second I see any evidence of aliens, I will immediately post that on the X platform, and it'll probably be our #1 post of all time.
That'll be your biggest day.
Yes.
These are the most brutal torture devices ever created by mankind. Number 5, rat torture. Basically, you trap a bunch of rats in a cage on a victim's body and start to heat the cage up. The rats, of course, panic. They become desperate to escape. They start digging, and the only way they can dig is directly into the victim. Number 4, white torture. They simply put you in a white room. It was pure sensory deprivation. People who have gone through this say that when they came out of it, they never felt free again. Number 3, North Vietnamese prisoner of war torture. They would hang prisoners by their ankles with a nest of biting ants over their face until they'd lose consciousness. They'd also suspend them in wells, so if they fell asleep, they'd drown. Or they'd get tiny wedges of bamboo, insert them under your fingernails and let them grow. But it gets so much worse. Number 2, Unit 713's human experimentation. This was pure malice. During World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army conducted horrible experiments on its prisoners of war. But don't worry, they didn't consider them people. They just considered them test subjects. They called them logs. They would cut people open while alive just to see how it affected the organs. They remove people's limbs and try and attach them to other sides of their body, obviously while they're awake. And of course, they tested various biological weapons, such as grenades filled with ticks that carried horrible diseases. But number 1 is flaying. If you don't know, flaying is also known as skinning. Did you know you can remove the skin from someone's face while keeping them alive? Well, supposedly it's agonizing, and it's exactly what the Mexican cartel do to people who wrong them, such as rival gangs or just random people that piss them off.
Two faces. Oh, symmetry. How can you possibly do that by hand? There's been some interesting studies done on the faces of giant statues. One in particular is the face of Ramses. Chris Dunn was real seminal in this. He took a photo, take a copy of that photo, make it 50% transparent, make the original 50% transparent, take one and you flip it like on that horizontal axis. It's perfectly symmetrical, left to right. Many engineers, master stonemasons, stone carvers, they see it immediately and they just dismiss the idea that this was done with pounding stones and copper chisels. There's a reason why there is a growing interest in the mysteries of lost ancient civilizations. People of all kinds of walks of life are looking into the nuanced details and realizing like, oh, wait a second. When Graham Hancock says that there's a missing chapter of human history, like this is reality. We don't know how they built the Great Pyramid. It is a fact that the Egyptians left us with no explanation of any kind. Out of the tens of thousands of hieroglyphs all over Egypt, not a single one of them describes how they constructed the pyramid or how they cut granite stones. Not one.
Soon after hearing something move in the kitchen, a faint whimper can be heard, followed by the unsettling sound of disembodied footsteps.
What if I told you the Titanic never sank? What? So the owner of the boat, J.P. Morgan, actually had two boats. He had the Titanic and he had the Olympic. And the Olympic was a little bit older and a little bit more run down, and it was also in some accident. Okay. So the theory is that J.P. Morgan sank the boat on purpose because he knew he would get a lot of money. What? He did it for the insurance money, right? But why sink the newly built Titanic when you could scratch off the paint, swap the names, and sink the Olympic instead?
You just painted the word Titanic over the Olympic?
It gets worse. Guess who was on that boat?
Who? I know there's a lot of people on the boat.
All of J.P. Morgan's business competitors.
What?
And not one of them made it out.
Oh my god.
But guess who wasn't on the boat?
Who?
J.P. Morgan.
Was he supposed to be?
He canceled minutes before it left.
Because he knew it was gonna sink.
And there was a guy named James Fenton, right, who survived and worked on the boat. And on his deathbed, his last words were, "The Titanic never sank. It was the Olympic."
Wait, what?
And he said that if he said anything, something bad would happen to him.
So what you're trying to say is the movie Titanic's actually called the Olympic?
Exactly.
Dirty facts about history that they'll never teach you in school, part 15. When Blackbeard blockaded Charleston Harbor in 1718, he wasn't seeking gold, but instead demanded mercury. Up until the 20th century, it was widely believed that injecting mercury into the urethra was a cure for syphilis. After a long stay in the brothels of Barbados, most of the men in Blackbeard's fleet were infested with STDs. Thus, Blackbeard captured Charleston Harbor to try and make his male parts feel better. The first ever reliable pregnancy test involved injecting a woman's urine into the skin of a female African clawed frog. If the woman was pregnant, the frog would lay eggs within a few hours. William the Conqueror smashed his nuts so hard on his horse's saddle that it gave him an awful infection which he died from a few weeks later. Priests later tried to force his body into a stone coffin that was far too small, causing his corpse to effectively explode. In the 19th century, doctors would perform pelvic massages to treat hysteria in women. Essentially, women would be finger-banged until they reached hysterical paroxysm, aka climax. But these treatments were often time-consuming and gave many doctors carpal tunnel. Thus, the vibrator was born.
The story goes that there's a giant pyramid in China. Oh yeah, it's massive. It's supposedly even larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. They call it the White Pyramid, and it's hidden somewhere deep in the landscapes of the Shanxi province. The story goes that in 1942, there were these two German pilots who were running a covert scouting mission, and when they reached the end of the route, they reported seeing this massive structure covered in a shining white material. There's theories that it could be the same limestone that the ancient Egyptians used to cover the Great Pyramid, but this is where it gets interesting. The size they described is way beyond anything we know from ancient Chinese history. Could the reason we can't find it be because it's now just covered up, just like the Pyramid of Sun in Bosnia, exposed to thousands of years of overgrown forest? And just like the Amazon rainforest, there is no funding to LiDAR scan the area. Further evidence which supports its existence is written in the flight manuscript. Check this out. The coordinates noted by the pilots of this pyramid also lie perfectly on the ancient ley lines that Giza and many other sites sit on. Luigi Mangioni's new federal charges now carry the possibility of the death penalty. In one day, Luigi participated in 3 separate court hearings across 2 states, was transported in several cars, a plane, and a helicopter. He was extradited to New York, where he was perp walked by so many officers that they indirectly created what the internet is now calling the hardest picture of the year. He was indicted on 11 state charges in New York, but also federal charges of stalking and first-degree murder as an act of terrorism. And those federal charges are significant because they carry the possibility of the death penalty. That's a sentencing option that is not allowed with his state charges in New York because they abolished capital punishment in 2004. Federal charges, however, often come into play when an offense crosses state lines or has national implications, and they also can lead to severe penalties. Luigi's defense commented on those federal charges, calling them highly unusual and that they raise serious constitutional concerns. And then to round out the longest day in his life, he was taken to a New York prison notorious for its poor living conditions. In recent years, it's seen multiple deaths, violence, suicide, staff shortages, and it sells of house people like Diddy, R. Kelly, Ghislaine Maxwell, Sam Bankman-Fried, and now Luigi Mangione.
crib, the room was still and quiet, when suddenly a toy car mysteriously rolled out into the open from underneath the crib. Then a few moments later, this car appeared to get pushed across the room. This small vehicle went from being completely motionless to suddenly launching to the right. This TikTok user witnessed everything on the camera and quickly rushed into the room to find an explanation. She checked under the crib and looked around, but was unable to find anyone or anything that could have caused this. She soon followed this up by posting a video of the toy car in question.
C'est pas une auto téléguidée, comme vous pouvez voir. C'est pas une auto à crank non plus.
Despite taking batteries, the wheels on this car are not electric, and it doesn't have the ability to move on its own. The only way it can roll forward is if someone physically pushed it. So could it be that a ghostly presence got so bored that it resorted to playing with a toy car?
I didn't realize at the time that the Quran was very different than the Bible, even though there's some crossover, in that the Bible is a little bit more chronological. The Quran is situated with the longest chapters at the front and the shortest chapters at the back. It reads a little bit more confusing. You don't necessarily start from the beginning and work through. The Bible is 66 books, and it's 66 books. It's written over a period of 1,600 years on 3 different continents by close to 40 different authors in 3 different languages. And so it's an anthology, whereas the Quran is kind of situated in one particular vein of history. It's written in 7th century Arabia. It's written in a single language, Hijazi script Arabic. So even though it's claiming to harken back to stories that predated and, reflect on some of the stories that you find in the Bible of the prophets of Abraham, of Moses, of Jonah, even Jesus, John the Baptist, Mary there and there, it's still very much one place at one time in a different way that the Bible is.
CIA can break American laws. FBI can break American laws. NSA can break American laws. All the intelligence community has certain authorities granted to them which allow them a carve-out, a legal carve-out, to break a certain law in order to serve national security interests. So, for example, Border Patrol and Customs and Border. They are able to actually clone any device at the border, whether it's an American citizen or a foreign citizen. They can clone a device at the border. That's one of the authorities granted to them, even though it breaks privacy law. Under U.S. laws. But the reason they have that authority is because there are times when it's in the best interest of national security to clone a device surreptitiously, clandestinely, without the owner knowing it. CIA can't do that, FBI can't do that, DIA can't do that, Marine Corps can't do that, but Customs and Border can. And then with that information, they can send that to the CIA, where FBI sends different intel, where NSA sends different intel, all according to their different authorities, and now CIA can create a packet of truly secret information that gets shared with the president about any number of national security issues, right? You and I as American citizens don't have any authorities, so we have to follow American law or else deal with the consequences.